advantages to what I just described to you is sort of learning around a meal, learning via literature, is that my high schoolers always came and did that with us. All right, so that became their social studies, their history, their geography, all of that was learned because they just came and ate lunch with us. Okay, I even had the girls, they'd go off to college, and if I was reading something to the kids, they would come and hang out. Oh, I remember that book, that was so cool. And they'd come and hang out while they were, while they were home. And that was a lovely thing. My son actually said he was preparing his transcript. We were preparing his transcript to get into college. And he goes, Mom, they want me to have social studies. I never did social studies. Which is, our focus was really social studies, right? And, through literature. But because I hadn't given him a textbook and called it a course, he didn't actually recognize. So that was a pretty good trick, hey? So high school basically is looking pretty similar. My high schoolers, some of them have continued to do dictation or moved into writing. So we would spend a little bit of time one-on-one with them doing dictation or writing. Usually by the time they were in high school, they would be well into a math program that they could work on their own. Of course, now we have so many resources that if they got stuck on something that I couldn't help them with, then we could hire a tutor, we could take an online class. There's many different ways that we could address, sort of getting stuck in a place. But the homeschool curriculum that's written now, especially for math and science, is so well done for homeschoolers, as a self-teaching textbook, that, we've had very little trouble with that, sort of getting stuck in something and not knowing what to do next or not knowing how to proceed. I never imagined myself learning algebra, because by the time they were 12 or 13 and we were introducing algebra, that they were working completely independently, except, my son who's 16. And, so I said, you know what, I will take you as far as I can with this. I'm just going to sit right beside you like I always have. I'm just going to sit right beside you, support you, do it with you, learn it if I have to. And that's what we'll do. And if that doesn't work, I'll hire a tutor. If that doesn't work, we'll figure out another plan. But you can learn this. It's just going to take time. As it turns out, I've learned how to do algebra, and I actually kind of like it. I never imagined that. I did not get it at all in high school. I took it, and they passed me because I was a nice girl. And they said, you're not going to do math in college, right? And I said, no. And they said, okay, well, give you a pass, right?
Can you just define what you're referring to as the high school grades, just the beginning?
Okay, so, typically we think of sort of grade 8 to 12 as being high school. The grades that matter for your transcript, if you go into a college or university, are 10, 11, and 12. Yeah. All right? So that's an important number, because it is kind of the magic number. That's when, even if you've never kept track, I think you should keep track. I think it's a good idea. I don't want to be questioned by anybody at any point in my life who says it doesn't look like you're giving your kids an education. So I keep track of what we do and what we've learned. But in 10, 11, and 12, if you want them to have a high school transcript, you need to keep track of everything they do, because everything can become part of some sort of a course, right? So that's super important. So in around grade 8 or 9, that's usually when I'd be raising the discussion with my kids. First of all, this is what a dogwood is. This is why you might want one. This is why I don't care if you have one. This is how I would support you to get one. This is what it's going to look like, okay, if you do or if you don't. So it's just a discussion. I'm just presenting information. They may choose. And I'm not going to lead them one way or the other. They're led by the fact that I don't care. I mean, that's part of it, right? But, ultimately, some of them have thought about getting the dogwood, and some of them have not. They're just like, no, why would that matter? And some of them are like, yeah, let me think about that for a while. And, it's not a done deal. If in grade 9 they say, no, I don't want a dogwood, and then they get halfway through grade 10 and they think, I totally want a dogwood, right? I'm going to switch gears. It's not too late. They could be 18 and it wouldn't be too late for them to get a dogwood. They would have to take the correct courses and write the correct exams, right? It's not, just because you missed the beginning of grade 10 doesn't mean, oh, okay, well, a dogwood is just not an option for me anymore, right? They can change plans. They can change gears. Or they might think they really, really want to get a dogwood, and they spend 6 months, preparing for that and doing all the right courses, and they're finding it boring and they'd rather do other things. And they say, actually, I've decided I'm not going to get a dogwood. So those are something that we can do. Those of you who are not from BC, anyone not from BC? So the dogwood is our graduation certificate. It's the piece of paper, it has a dogwood on it. That's why we call it a dogwood. So, I'm really going to talk about my perspective on this and what we've done, simply because if you're in DL and if you're enrolled, you do have guidance. You have somebody kind of walking with you who's helping you know what courses your child needs to take in order to get their graduation certificate, okay? So from the perspective of not getting a certificate or doing an alternate route is where I'm going to spend the next few minutes. Most of us would like to leave the door open for our children to go to college or university, okay? So what that means is, in the big picture of things, is that their high school transcript is going to have to look pretty similar to a transcript of any other school kid. All right, so their core courses are going to be the same. They're going to have math, they're going to have English, they're going to need a science. They, used to need a second language. I don't think they, don't anymore, right? And then they're going to need a whole bunch of electives, okay, to fill in the gaps. And some of them will have to be in the social studies realm, but that's pretty wide open. You might have 5 or 6 or 10 different social studies that you could take. Or sciences. You have a range of sciences that you could take. They don't require that you must take biology or you must take chemistry. It's usually one of those grade 11, you need a grade 11 science. So that's the language that a university or college is going to read. Okay, they also read letter grades and they read percentages. So when you're developing a transcript for your child, okay, you're going to want something that's kind of official looking for grade 10 and 11 and 12. For me, I just typed up a document and I put homeschool transcript at the top by Bonnie Landry, main teacher Bonnie Landry, and then I listed, grade 10 and what we did. Some things, if it was a course that I designed, then I would have to give a little description of what the course was, maybe a paragraph or a few sentences, and I would also have to come up with how I arrived at my letter grade. Okay, so maybe that's going to be my own credentials. Maybe that's going to be, I say to Mary, this English course I've designed, can you read this essay and tell me if you think that it's, what percent level it's at, so that I can develop the letter grade and the percentage that I'm going to hand in. So you can't make stuff up, right? We don't want to make stuff up because it's not going to help our kids, right? So if we're designing something ourselves, if you were really into science or math, technically you could design a science or math course for your child. You could put together the resources that you think are really amazing and come up with probably a science course that's better than any textbook you could buy. You'd have to be very comfortable with the course material, or the child would. Sometimes the child's going to design their own course. They're 16 or 17, they're a real whip at science, and they want to I think I could do a really great science course if I put together these particular types of material. Okay, let's write it up. It's a science course. We want to make sure, if we're calling it biology, that we're covering the normal things that's in a normal biology course, but you're using cooler resources than maybe the textbooks that you've been presented so far. Okay, so essentially what we're doing then is just developing our own transcript. There are some resources online for doing that. The best one is a gal whose name is Lee Binns. She's American. She's kind of helping homeschoolers negotiate high school and get into college with scholarships and whatnot. So it's very much geared at Americans, but she has some great resources on how to develop your transcript and how to turn all the things your kids have done into a course or courses. Oh, your child had this experience, like 4-H, for example. Your child did 4-H right up to grade 12, or your child did scouting right up to grade 12. Let's put that together as a course. It's outdoor education, or it's, animal husbandry, or whatever it is, and it becomes one of their electives. So keep track of everything they do, from probably grade 9 on, if you're not already doing that, but in kind of a detailed way, so that you're just, I just have a document on my computer that every time we do something, I just add it to the document. Now it's going to be sort of, if somebody else looked at it at this point, could be kind of nonsensical, but then I'm going to take it at the end of grade 10 or whatever and take all that stuff and actually write it up like a course. So English literature, and this was the reading list and this is the mark, okay? Or, drama, this is what we did and this was the mark. So, that's what your high school transcript is going to look like. And she's got some great examples on there of things that you can do, and she has at the bottom of the page, I think I printed them off. So she has one high school transcript here. It's academic record by subject. So she goes through English, 10, 11, 12. Then she goes through math, 10, 11, 12. Then science, 10, 11, 12. And then she has another transcript that's according to year. So grade 10, these are all the things we did. Here's the letter grade. Here's the credits. If you want to even speak in language of credits, you can do that. I haven't had, our kids have been accepted at maybe 3, 4 different places, and nobody ever asked for credits. They did want to see something very similar to a normal high school transcript, right? And so I'll pass these around so you guys can have a look at them. And some of them might be, like, say there's a history book that your kid really likes, like, I don't know, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, or, the history of the Gospel of John. You could the Gospel of John with all kinds of commentary. We've got a Gospel of John that's, an inch thick. There's all kinds of commentary and historical notes. There's no reason that couldn't be a course, right? If they read it, they've read all the material, they've answered the questions, they've discussed it. There's no reason on earth that couldn't be a high school elective, right? So if we don't have a high school transcript, we can actually go in as an adult student. Okay, I believe the age is 20. You can go in as an adult student. Is it 20 or 18?
I was 19.
Yeah. So if your child had no interest at all in getting a high school transcript, they didn't want to do math for you, they didn't want to, we could butt our heads a lot if our child was giving a lot of pushback. We could butt our heads a lot. Or we could just say, you know what, if you're not going to do that for me, right, this is what I'm requiring you to do. But if you're not getting a graduation certificate, it's not worth my relationship with you. Okay, it's not worth it to me to butt heads with you about this. So, but you have to have full disclosure. You must do this math in order to get into university. Well, I'm not interested in going to university. I want to be a carpenter. All right, fair enough. But if you ever change your mind, or if they require you as a carpenter to have your grade 11 math, or you have geometry or whatever, then you will need to take a course in that. Right? I think that's a very mature discussion to have with a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old. Is you can opt out of that. I'm not going to butt heads and argue with you. There's just no point in doing that. But full disclosure, and for some kids, they might come back at you 2 years later and say, you never told me. So I would write it down.
And get them to sign it.
Seriously, I would. Because if you have a kid, especially if they are a headbutter, if you wrote it down and said, okay, I just want to know, in your future, we have full disclosure that I told you this information, you had been given the information, and you opted out of math right now. Okay? That's a pretty dire situation, right? And maybe sometimes too, our husband can come in and they can teach a subject that maybe we're butting heads with, that the child won't butt heads with, right? Just because there's a different relationship there. So that's okay. The other option we have is to write the GED, which you can do at any age. So that's the grade, what was something equivalency.
General education
Diploma, right, yes.
And I think
Which
it's
is
like grade 10 equivalency. That's about where it's supposed to be at. It's not
Right.
the same as a grade 12.
As a grade 12, but you can get into college
You can get
with
into
it.
like trades training and stuff with the GED.
Or a community college will take your GED. If I had never been educated and at 35 I thought, you know what, say I had never finished high school, I want to be a doctor. I think I've got what it takes. I want to be a doctor. What do? I go take the prerequisites to get into university. I get my medical prerequisites, and I apply to medical school. Now that's long and it's hard work, but is it impossible? Of course not, right? Because education isn't static. It never is. So there will be holes. Every single kid coming out of school is not able to get in every single program all around the countryside. There's things they're going to be missing, especially if they're not sure. Say they wanted to get into a fine arts program, but they didn't know that till after they graduated. Oh, I really wish I had set myself up to get into that fine arts school, but I didn't do that. Oh, okay, what do you need? So what if you're 21? Go back, take the courses you need, and get into the fine arts program. There's just nothing holding us back from making our education exactly what we want it to be. And so if we go into high school, with this idea is like, okay, I don't want to butt heads with my kids, that takes a lot of pressure off to know that there's more ways than one to do this, right? There's more possibilities. And we're going to work on these things. We're going to work on the relationship. And in a good relationship, you get more academics done. You just do. It's when the relationship is bad that the academics come hard, right? So, so on our high school transcript, as we're developing that, we need to, they want a letter grade and a percentage, right? So if they're doing a sort of a self-teaching course, like say they're using a textbook and it has quizzes in it and we're doing the tests, the chapter tests at the end, that's self-marking. You know what mark they got on the course because of their quizzes and tests that they did in the textbook. If it's something you've designed yourself, you have to find ways of developing how you marked that, how you gave them a letter grade. You know, and you can't just make it up. I mean, you could, but I wouldn't. I think ethically it's just wrong. But also, I don't think you're telling your kid any good thing. I'll just give you an A because I can, you know, and nobody's asking the question, so I might as well give you an A. That's not really building up the person, you know.
So hold on a second.
Yeah.
Are you saying that my kid could have a high school transcript to get into university that I could write
That's exactly what I'm saying.
actually count?
They do. I mean,
Aren't colleges actively seeking homeschool students?
colleges are actively seeking homeschoolers because their study habits are
Not
so
even
different.
colleges, universities.
That would actually work to get them into university.
So the question is, you know, can I write out my own child's high school transcript and have it count to university? Well, hundreds and thousands of kids have done it in the US, in Canada, people that I know, my own children. It just counts. But they want to see a certain thing. They don't want to, you need to speak their language, okay? So you need to take whatever they do, and it needs to look pretty similar to what they have, right? What they expect a child to have.
And you could probably get help from someone if you need it, like just for the transcript.
Piles of help.
Yeah.
This lady, the home scholar, Lee Binns, her whole website is getting your high school age kids through high school and getting them off to university. And that's what she does. Now, it's geared at Americans, you know, and most of us are not putting kids in American universities because of the dollar right now. You know, we're not thinking that way. However, you know, 75% of the information on there would help you also develop that. You know, she has some CDs, like teaching CDs, where for the parent, where she's saying, okay, this is what you need to do. This is the data you're going to need. This is how you're going to produce it. This is what it needs to look like. Okay?
So my daughter does not actually have to go back into school if she doesn't want.
No.
Yeah.
She could still get a dogwood and not go into school either. She can get a dogwood being homeschooled, but she would need to be enrolled.
Right.
Yeah. You know, it didn't used to be that way. Before the enrollment thing happened, before the difference between there never was enrollment and registration. That's kind of newish. So when we first started homeschooling, we were just all homeschoolers, and we just all got no money, and we were all happy, and and we didn't have any help, and we were a bunch of free spirits. But when that came in, they've basically over the years they've made it people got their dogwood as a homeschooler. They just had to find their own way. They usually would link up with a high school and say, I want my child to have their dogwood, so can they take these courses? We're doing these courses at home. Can we have an academic counselor just help us negotiate this, and can we be at your high school to do our high school exams, and then we can get our dogwood, and they would graduate out of your school. And the high schools would just say yeah. But they've basically made it impossible to do that on our own. You need to be enrolled to do that. You could, if you really wanted to fight it, you probably could fight your way through that, but I don't know why. I don't think it'd be worth the effort myself. But yeah, so she doesn't need a dogwood. She doesn't need to be enrolled. She doesn't need to have a transcript except whatever you make up. And they will count it. There's very few places. One time I've heard of one parent, and it was actually a trade school, and they wouldn't accept that it was a homeschool transcript. Right? It was a carpentry school.
Was it in BC or?
No, it was in Alberta. Yeah.
Last year, someone had trouble at UBC, and I don't know if it was because it wasn't an official enough transcript. Like,
Right.
I don't know the details.
Okay.
So there might be other reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. So we stress a lot about getting it right, okay? And I think that we spend way too much time worrying about getting it right. But because it's education, okay? It's education, it's not static, it's ever changing, we're ever learning, we're always growing. That getting it right doesn't need to be a hang up for us, because A, we can add things in later on, and B, the child can learn things as an adult. So if there are holes and, you know, they really want to fill those holes, they are, you know, able to do so. And they will figure it out, and we can help them figure it out. But at some point, they are on their own. And that's what we're moving towards. We're moving towards functional adults. And so if we do everything for them, that's not even healthy. If we do everything for them and tell them exactly what they're supposed to do. My kids have pretty strong opinions about their own education from the time, you know, grade 8 or 9. I want to try that science program. I saw so-and-so using a science program. I really like, can I try that science program? I'm totally open to all of their suggestions, right? You know, so yeah, if you want to do that, great. My one of my daughters didn't want to do English with me. So, you know, grade 9 came around and I said, you know, you do need to learn to write if you want to go to university. And she, you know, a lot of pushback about that. And I said, you know, if you don't want to write with me, if you don't want to learn how to write, then why don't you pick a program? You can go through the book. She's, no, I'll write for you. That was some sort of torture. I was just saying, just choose what you would like. And she said, no, I'll write with you. So she didn't. So she spent that whole year not writing with me. And then grade 10 came along and I said, you know, we didn't do any writing. So we have to do something different, because I can't in good conscience put that on your transcript that you've completed grade 10, 11, 12 English if you won't actually do anything for me. So let's talk about that. You know, you can not do it later in your life, full disclosure, or you can choose a program that I'm not involved in, right? So we just take the headbutting out of it. And she said, okay, I'll choose a program. She chose the hardest English program on the market. And she did great, and it was good for her, and somebody else was marking her work. You know, it was a good experience for all of us. So, you know, but that's okay. If she had opted out, I would have been okay with that. But then when she came to university, I would have made her write it down. If she opted out, I would have actually made a little paper like this and said, we both read this, we both sign it, full disclosure, right?
You can get a lot of your course credits online too, right? With
Tons,
open
yeah.
learning and
Yeah.
stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like MIT offers all their previously recorded courses for free now. Khan Academy likes courses for free. There's so many, it's changing so fast right now. So fast. I mean, you could, you know, do a 15-part art history course on Khan Academy or you know, biology course or whatever, and it could be your course. I mean, why would it not be? You know, it's amazing. There's some amazing tools. So we want to prepare our kids for all eventualities, and the reality is that all eventualities can be met. All right? Maybe not by the time they're 17 or 18, but you can, there's really no bridge they can't cross unless they just don't have the intellectual capacity to learn a particular thing. Right? And sometimes that does happen, but it's probably not the field they're going to go into then. You know, so we don't need to get too excited about it. When our kids were little, we used to talk a lot, us and the Dennisons used to talk a lot about where our kids would go and what their education would look like when they got older. And they would not go here and they would go here, and this is where we're sending them for university, and this is what we're doing for this and this and this. And as it turned out, they grew up and they became adults and they had their own opinions, right? And we hadn't really reconciled that. You know, that was, oh, they're going to have opinions about where they want to go, and they're earning money to go there, and it's not exactly what I had in mind, or it's exactly what I had in mind, but I really had nothing to do with it. Because they're adults, and we have to start, you know, we sort of let those reins out slowly, you know, that they have to start making those adult type decisions. Some kids can do that at 13. Some kids, they're closer to 16 or 17 before they can make decisions that have some wisdom, right? And ideally, if the relationship's intact, they come to their parents and they say, what do you think of my idea? Our son came at 16. He was basically finished everything he needed to finish for school. He's very academically proactive, a really smart kid. And at 16, he said, could I go to this little college that our kids have all spent a year at? Could I go next year? He would have just turned 16 when he was leaving. And we both were like, I don't think so. You know, this is weird. And we mulled it over, prayed about it, and came back with, you know, I think we just need to say yes. And so we did say yes, and then he ended up deciding to wait a year himself and just take a couple more courses and work part-time and whatnot. So it was nice, but it was nice to know that, he's bringing this up with us, and we're not just saying, absolutely not, or you must go to university, or you must go to this university, right? It's a discussion. They're adults. They're moving toward adulthood. And so I would just like to remind you to not be daunted then by homeschooling high school with your kids. I don't think it's something that we need to be freaked out about. We can just take it one day at a time, 1 week at a time, and know that wherever it is they want to end up, they're going to be the people ending up there. You're going to help them, you're going to guide them, you're going to support them, you're going to walk with them, but you're not going to do the work, right? They ultimately have to be the person doing the work to get to where they want to go. And, with your guidance, they're going to end up in a really good place. So, any questions about homeschooling high school that haven't yet been addressed yet?
So basically, by the time they're high school age, you let your kids decide what curriculum they're going to choose for themselves?
If they want to, or they some are happy to take my recommendations, but most of them, I would say, have some pretty strong opinions about what they would like to do, what science they'd like to do, what history they'd like to study. That's something we're doing together, but I'm totally willing to, I don't make all the decisions, right?
What actual curriculum do you actually purchase or the kids select for themselves? Math, maybe every year, or
yeah.
What are like the ones like every single year that you definitely kind of go outside your home to buy?
Right. Well, you end up, first of all, collecting a lot of curriculum.
Sure.
So you use the same curriculum that you used, if you're buying textbooks. Textbooks are really expensive, but, if you're buying them for an older child, you can also save them for younger kids.
Right.
But usually science and math is what I'm doing. There's definitely been some other courses that the kids have taken. We do virtually nothing online. I had a son take a class, a calculus class that was an actual online class where he sat in an online classroom 2 days a week and had a instruction and then did the work required of him. And then I had one of my boys right now is just taking a Socratic discussion class on J.R.R. Tolkien, and it's just they're listening into the class, or they can text or listen in. I don't know what that's called. Is there a name for that? An online class. Anyways, but they're not seeing other people. They're just listening and texting as they do it. That's basically been it for our courses. But so mainly, the curriculum I'm buying is math, primarily math and science.
Okay.
Yeah. If one of them decided, they want to take a second language or they want to do some other thing, I'm totally open to that. Our home education has not been an expensive thing in our home, right? Because of the way I approach education. So I have just no qualms at all. If they said I want to go do a such and such camp, or if I want to go buy this set of books so that I can study something, it would be pretty rare that I would say, no, that, it's too expensive or whatever, because our overall, what we've spent on education, if we had our kids in private school, or if we had, been buying curriculum all the way along, curriculum packages and whatnot, we would have spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars more than we have. I would say my average sort of homeschooling costs, not including music lessons, because they would have done that anyway, so I'm just taking that out of the equation. I would say $500 to $600 a year. And it's mostly books. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, yeah.
Have you ever had it where people would say that because of the lack of online and the lack of computers, that would be a detriment to the children, that they don't gain that experience? 'Cause we've had that question in our home.
Yeah.
And if we didn't find it necessary, what if the children wanted to pursue
Yeah.
computer science or whatever? Would you have approached their education differently?
I think that, first of all, kids are so computer literate, like they catch on so fast because they don't have any of the baggage that I have about learning it. I don't think we need to be exposing them to it in grade 2 and 3 and 4. Even if we think they might have, a career in computer science, I think we could introduce it. Plus, it's changing so fast. If we introduced it in grade 8, 9, 10, 11 even, they could be finished school. And then, take a programming class or take something. And they breathe it in. It's amazing. I just find that amazing. But they just don't have the same learning barriers that we do, in the sense that it's a new thing in our life, and they pick it up so much more quickly than I, for sure. You guys are, most of you are quite a bit younger than me, so it would be different for you. Computers would have just been part of what you did. For me, it wasn't like that. It was a very, very, very slow learning process that I actually was completely dug my heels in until about 5 years ago. And my husband bought me my own little netbook, and that was no going back, right? Huh?
Just
Oh,
as a
thank you.
little comment,
Thank you.
my daughter got a degree in computer science without doing any online courses at home.
Yeah. Really doing an online course is not the same thing as learning about computers, right? It's maybe teaching you to type. I do teach my kids to type. I think that's an important skill to have.
And using an Excel spreadsheet is very helpful.
Yeah.
I've found in my professional life and my education, and knowing how to create some basic postery type things. So writing a paper, Excel, the Office suite. I think it is really important that students leave the schooling world with those
having some business skills.
Because if they don't know how to do that stuff, you're not allowed to submit your papers in university handwritten.
No, of course not. And I think that, that's why typing is something I started quite young with them, so that by the time they're in high school, but they type out all of their things that they write, they always type them out, right? I mean, they write them out, but then they type them out, because I think it's just good practice.
So your kids do use computers?
For typing, you must have missed this part because I went through this. They do typing about 5 minutes a day. They type out their, if they've written something, they type that out. Usually, I wouldn't say 100% of the time, but usually. They do times tables for about 2 minutes a day on a computer. And if they do a second language, they're using manga or Duolingo or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, just a very
But
limited.
I think with the question, when people raise questions like that, usually it's like what do you mean by computer literate? Do you mean they can navigate Facebook or social media? Because, most kids in the world are not using their computers to learn how to use Microsoft Office suite. So it's just the same kind of misconception.
Yeah.
And
Or that somehow doing an online learning something when you're 9 is going to help you. Yeah.
A parent coming alongside and guiding you, a few minutes a day in how to use this device properly is going to get you way more than playing on it for 3 hours every day.
Right.
Yeah. When I wrote those little books, the lady that helped me write the first couple of them, helped me actually produce them, said, you have to put it on a Kindle, right? And I said, homeschooling mothers don't read Kindles. And she said, yeah, I think you're going to be wrong about that. And I was like, I couldn't even think. And she said, okay, well, just try it. It doesn't cost you anything. Just put it on a Kindle. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Kindle books have sold, And I was like, who are these homeschooling mothers that are reading Kindles? I had to adjust. I had to do a mental adjustment.
An electronic reader for my daughter because she's dyslexic, and so she can comprehend and read material that's above grade level, but she can't read it when it's those pages that are just the tiny little font, and this every word is it's really compact. So you can actually use a Kindle to spread the words out, narrow the margins down, and make the letters really big. So it's really easy for people with learning disabilities to actually read them.
So you can go on the Kindle and you can say, she actually said my child can have a transcript written by me. She actually said, there it is in black and white. So I just want to end with something. You guys can stay around and chit-chat for a little while, but I'd like to just end with this. What my hope is that, all of this discussion, all of what we've talked about will help you understand the place of relationship in education and the importance of that. And that when you go to purchase something or make a decision, that what is on your mind while you're doing that is that this thing that I'm signing up for, this curriculum that I'm about to buy or considering buying, this program that I'm about to put my kid in, is it going to add to or detract from our family relationships? Right? That's the question that needs to be on your mind. And so I'm hoping that this information helps you to be able to do that so that we can make the decisions appropriately. This is the most important thing, our family relationships. And is this thing going to add to or detract from that relationship, right? Because ultimately that's the question, that's the most important thing whenever you buy something or sign up for something or choose to do something. So thank you all for coming. This has been lovely, my filmed audience.